Welcome back to another episode of the United States of Anxiety. Consequences, unintended consequences, and the reality of doing something too fast. Sure, there's a lot of things Donald Trump or any other administration could do quickly, but the executive orders and the pace and what they're actually related to, along with all of the federal layoffs, have consequences that nobody knows what they'll really be. But when it comes to actual dollars that affect employees that have crucial positions, we can almost guarantee ourselves the consequences might not be what we would like. And there are a couple of areas that really bring that to light in this breaking story you do not want to miss regarding what Donald Trump just did and the fear of abject, irreversible destruction. And right when I get to that in a few seconds, take a note, since we just had huge fires in Los Angeles, let's just take a look from one federal worker just as it relates to the forest, not even the severity of this breaking story. Take a listen.
This is such a threat to the national forest. And no one's is really grasping that right now.
Without wanting to share his identity, a now former U.S. Forest Service employee says he is deeply concerned about the sweeping layoffs of federal workers, including members of the U.S. Forest Service here in Northern California.
I believe in everything we do. We do everything out there for the public. And it's just disheartening because the forest is non-political. It's for everyone, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians. I don't care your affiliation. It is there for us to use. And everyone uses this beautiful land every day. And that's the part that's going to suffer the most.
On Thursday and Friday, the federal government laid off thousands of workers. It's part of a massive overhaul and shrinking of federal agencies around the country.
They are not taking context into consideration at all. There are ways to cull federal service. This is not the way to do it.
This worker is with another federal agency and also asked we conceal her identity. While she still has her job, she worries she'll be next to lose it. She says her colleagues have already been cut.
If you need a federal permit, someone needs to be there to assess it and give it to you.
But workers in Northern California say the impacts will be felt, and fast.
Nobody has any answers what the true domino effect is going to be. And it's going to be devastating for a lot of people.
So that commentary is related to the danger as we get, again, towards spring, summer, in terms of forestry workers and what could happen, either from dehydration, animal attacks, or again, just fires. But in this breaking story, oh no, we're going full nuclear, and Rachel Maddow has a little something to say to Dipstick Donald about that. Here is the story.
Trump layoffs leave Hanford nuclear site with skeleton crew. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington, quote, "The Trump administration has begun indiscriminately laying off Hanford workers in Washington state. Trying to run Hanford with a skeleton crew is a recipe for disaster that could have irreversible impacts." They're cutting the people who do cleanup work, security engineers, they're cutting at Hanford. In the Pacific Northwest, there is still a working commercial nuclear reactor that feeds the largest electricity supplier in that part of the country, which is the Bonneville Power Administration. Trump, in addition to firing the cleanup crews at Hanford, also just fired hundreds of people, more than 600 employees who keep the lights on at Bonneville, too. Mass layoffs at Bonneville Power Administration raise concerns about reliability of power grid. They're firing electricians there, engineers, line workers, cybersecurity experts. Again, that's the power grid, the biggest electricity supplier in the Pacific Northwest, including some of their electricity being supplied by a big commercial nuclear plant. Is that what you voted for? Cutting the people who maintain the power grid? Cutting the security engineers who manage the cleanup at one of the worst sites of nuclear contamination in the world, which is in our country? Trump has also now started firings at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, which does, among other things, nuclear security. You know, we also have a whole National Nuclear Security Administration. Or at least we did. Now we don't have a whole one because of what Trump has decided to do to them. Here at home, the National Nuclear Security Administration maintains and refurbishes and ensures the safe and secure storage and transportation and maintenance of our nation's thousands of nuclear weapons. NNSA runs the National Nuclear Labs. They develop nuclear propulsion systems for our nuclear submarines. They are the people in charge of making sure that terrorists don't get their hands on a nuclear weapon, or that nuclear weapons technology doesn't get stolen and sold on the black market. They're also in charge of making our new nuclear weapons and inspecting those weapons, and Trump is firing them. Thursday night, they sent out termination notices to more than 300 of them. Termination notices reportedly to hundreds of staff of the small, expert, professional, very important National Nuclear Security Administration. Isn't there anything about the name of that agency that might suggest to you that maybe this isn't the best place to make cuts? What about National Nuclear Security Administration bugs you and makes you think that one is dispensable? By Friday, the geniuses in the Trump administration had maybe Googled what this agency does or something, maybe heard from a few members of Congress. And so after sending out those termination notices on Thursday night, they tried on Friday to take it back. They tried to unfire the hundreds of people from the National Nuclear Security Administration that they had just fired the night before. But because, again, they're geniuses, they fired these people effective immediately and cut all of these people off from their work email and all their work computer systems and everything. And then a day later, when they decided, maybe we shouldn't have fired the National Nuclear Security Administration, they had no way to get in touch with all those people they had just fired to say, oops, sorry, please, will you come back? Trump administration officials on Friday, quote, attempted to notify some employees who had been let go the day before that they are now due to be reinstated, but they struggled to find them because they did not have their new contact information. In an email sent to employees at the National Nuclear Security Administration, obtained by NBC News, officials wrote, quote, the termination letters for some NNSA employees are being rescinded, but we do not have a good way to get in touch with those personnel. The President of the United States allowed his top campaign donor to send basically random, unvetted young people with no experience and no subject matter expertise at all into the agency that keeps America's nuclear weapons secure. And Donald Trump had those kids fire the people who work to keep America's nuclear weapons secure. And he had them fire them without those kids apparently having any idea what those people in that agency do. And without any way to get them back once they realized, okay, maybe no, that wasn't a good one. Has it occurred to any of you to maybe resign? If you're running a government this way, on national nuclear security grounds alone, have you considered resigning? Any part of the Trump administration that has overseen the accidental firing of the National Nuclear Security Administration? Have you considered resigning?
You know what's amazing to me about this? We have nearly 2 generations of people now who have no idea what 3 Mile Island is, and yet, or Chernobyl, and yet, the movie Oppenheimer just came out less than 18 months ago, and I wonder what the youth of America who went out and chose to watch this was wondering, that's funny, something from far, far away and long ago that doesn't matter. Really? No. And they don't even realize that we have nuclear all over this country just sitting there, decommissioned, but dangerous. And Donald Trump isn't looking at anything other than thinking, I can just do this. So he's doing it. And I'd like to remind you of a quote I came up with, me personally, 20 years ago in my life for me. Just because something's possible doesn't make it a good idea. Stay frosty.